July 15th, 2013. And I don't have my gavel with me, so we'll move on to public comment first. Public comment is reserved for any item that's on the agenda, so if you'd like to speak, come on up and just sit right here. It's easier than going back up to the podium. So go ahead for 3 minutes on any item that's on the agenda. Please spell your last name for the record. And there. I'm timing you. So.
Thank you. Champion, Champion. I wanted to speak to the coyote management plan. I don't know how much you delved into it after it was passed, but there is a part in there indicating that they're allowed to use lethal force in order to take care of coyotes who have shown to be aggressive or a problem for humans. What that means is they're allowed to use leg hold traps as one of the things. And I just have a real concern about leg hold traps within the city of Wheat Ridge. Leg hold traps, yes. They do have a 24-hour observation. However, what that means is someone will check these traps once every 24 hours. And so, you know, given busy schedules, that sort of thing, maybe it'll be once every 24 hours, maybe one day it'll be checked at 5, maybe the next day it'll be checked at 7, whatever. But even though I would like to see leg hold traps outlawed totally, I think it's very possible of unintended targets to be involved with these leg hold traps. And I mean, just consider the scenario of our storms recently. You get a lot of thunder and lightning. Someone who normally would have their dogs very secure, a dog can get out, run. Leg hold traps and these other lethal traps are not discriminate. So I would like to suggest that actually they not be allowed, but if you are to allow them, at least we have more restrictions on them. There are traps that have alarms on them, and it would let someone know if something was trapped, if that trap was triggered. It's a little bit more expensive, but I think given that it's supposed to be very rare that we have these incidents, that it would be well worth our dollars to do that. They also have ones that are padded. The trap, actually the jaws are padded, and they're padded with a waxy material that has a sedative in it. Now, that same trap has an alarm on it. Someone would be notified, hopefully it would come in a very short period of time. The animal could possibly already be sedated because once they've been caught, they usually go after whatever limb or whatever is caught to try to get loose. So hopefully that animal would also be sedated somewhat, and they could be euthanized right on the spot, whether that be a gunshot from a police officer. I think now it is the Colorado Parks and Wildlife who takes care of this, but I would like to see some better focus on these leg hold traps if we're going to allow them.
Thanks, Rhonda. That isn't really on the agenda for tonight, but I don't want to stop you because it's...
I thought
Well, it's animal control and the facilitator, but the
okay.
leg hold traps really wasn't on the agenda, but I didn't want to stop you and be rude, so...
Thank you.
You can come and speak at the regular council meeting on any item not on the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you. Chief?
Council will remember that the coyote management plan had been discussed with the Animal Welfare Commission, had been approved, and was a source of discussion at one of our last study sessions. I believe that particular issue of the plan and the traps are set to be discussed at the Animal Welfare Control Commission's meeting tomorrow evening. So that was my understanding when that was going to be discussed. So,
Jenny, that's going to be discussed tomorrow night at your animal control mission. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Any other public comment? Mr. Hill? Please spell your last name for the record.
Good evening, Council. My name is Jesse Hill, Hill. And tonight, on item number 6, you will be studying the proposed ballot language for the $6 million tax increase. This proposed language is unfortunately unacceptable, and honestly, I find it just plain offensive to the citizens of Wheat Ridge. A request for a blank check without any plans, specifics, or projects is outrageous and should not, cannot, and will not pass. There is time to fix this and make something workable. Please take the advice of last year's polling study and staff and propose something that's worthy of this great council here. For starters, it should be something that is, I consider, SMART, S-M-A-R-T, specific, measurable, achievable, results-oriented, and time-limited. While I personally have many of the same quality of life goals and ends that all of you here on council are going for, I really feel I've got to come here and just make sure that you guys are doing this the right way, because the ends really, as going forward, aren't really going to justify the means that you're going with aren't really going to justify the ends when it comes down to it. So, in an effort of good faith, when I was looking over some of the talking points that I guess you presented to you, I just wanted to kind of give a couple of ideas that I look and see on them. Point one, 1 cent, $1. Okay, we've got some basic math, but really, to the citizens of Wheat Ridge, they're seeing this as a 33% sales tax increase on them. Point three, financial responsibility, year-end surplus, no debt. This is definitely misleading and incorrect. The budget's really been balanced the last few years by drawing down reserves and deferring at least $7 million of maintenance. Financial responsibility is something that we should strive for, but I wouldn't be bragging particularly. Point nine, low tax burden. Wheat Ridge charges 3% of sales tax on groceries, and our surrounding cities of Denver and Lakewood, they realize the harm that this does to families and individuals and have a 0% tax on groceries. Wheat Ridge citizens are smart enough, and they're out of necessity. They're going to be going even more reason to these other cities to purchase groceries. I mean, just think of that. 4 cents on groceries, that's over 2 weeks a family could purchase groceries in another city. So, I mean, that's one of the things really we should be looking at. This is especially regressive on our seniors and our citizens in need of applying more of a burden on them. And I hope you really look at what you're proposing for this ballot language up here. Thanks for the time. I hope there's definitely considerate discussion going on tonight and other things. And even if you could, move, it should be the item number one, personally, I would see on the agenda tonight, because it deserves all the discussion it can. Thank you.
Anybody else here for public comment on any item on the agenda? So, seeing none, we'll move on to staff reports. Mr. Goff?
Sorry, you have one. 3 minutes, Chief.
Less than 3 minutes. Council should have received an email press release. The police department this morning made an arrest in the Leanne Annie Myers case and arrested Melissa Miller in regards to that particular case. There is a jurisdictional issue with the case in that it appears that the actual murder or homicide may have occurred in Park County. So after consultation with the 11th Judicial District, which includes Park County and our DA's office and the Park County Sheriff's Office, the decision was made by the District Attorney's offices to turn jurisdiction over on that case over to the 11th Judicial District, but that doesn't mean that we won't be involved. We've done all of the legwork on this case to this point, and in terms of making the arrest, and we'll continue to be involved in it, so it will stretch our resources a little bit, because we'll have detectives that'll be doing all of their testimony and motions in the actual upcoming trial in Park County. So, but good news on that we were able to make an arrest. So,
thanks, Chief. Questions? I'll move on to item number 2, lease agreement with Jefferson County for purpose of managing recreation gold panning. It's a hot topic.
Okay, thank you. So as the mayor said, I'm bringing forward tonight an item regarding approval of a lease agreement with Jefferson County in the area west of Youngfield and I-70 for the purpose of recreational gold panning. So I direct you to your packet and Exhibit A2, which is a map outlined in white of the area we're discussing tonight. So historically, this area is referred to as the Arapahoe Bar, and there's been mining in this area for a very long time. When the city annexed the area to the west of I-70, the issue of gold panning became more of a discussion point. And I think the reason for this is that we do not allow gold panning in our open space, and the users began to question whether they were going to be able to do gold panning as they've traditionally done over the years in this particular part of the creek. Then that led to the discovery that it's really not open space, it's county land owned by the general fund of Jefferson County and is in the Clear Creek Crossing Development Master Plan. So after a couple years of discussion in terms of how to manage the activity that was going on in the creek, because it is an somewhat environmentally sensitive area, but there is some damage going on and there's trail use, etc. The county came up with this solution to lease the city this particular area. So what that does for us, it allows us, because it's in our boundaries, to also have sole jurisdiction over a piece of land, consecutive rules, and consecutive management of an area. So that's the background on the lease agreement. And there's several reasons that both Jefferson County Open Space, the county, and Parks and Recreation Department here in Wheat Ridge would like to manage the recreational gold panning. And that's because the type of gold panning that's going on in the creek today can damage the banks and is damaging the banks. So the solution really is to manage that use and create recreational gold panning again, so that folks aren't in there trying to make a living out of the gold that they're really not finding in there, and in the meantime damaging creek banks, stirring up sediment, etc. The user groups are at conflict with each other on what's going on in the area, and they've really been asking for this for a couple years. The same concept would apply here in terms of impacting the resources of the police department, is that these would be rules for the area, the same way we discussed when we created the no smoking resolution, that would be brought back to you as a resolution and rules, voluntary compliance. And I'm going to be working with the stakeholders and the county to come up with a set of rules. And then I think the user groups will participate in self-enforcement. So I am seeking your approval for this lease tonight. I think it's a good solution to an issue that's been going on now for a couple of years.
Questions on the lease?
Joyce, this status quo, if I understood what you just said, is that there's land, there's county land, and they're just people without necessarily permission or their jurisdiction one way or the other that just go out there and use it for this purpose. And what we're trying to do is establish a regulatory framework to monitor and control that activity. Is that it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think the plan is a good plan. There was something in here that I read that kind of piqued my interest, is that we will not only be, I guess we'll be the leasee. We'll keep the leased property clean and in sanitary condition. Who is currently keeping the area clean and in sanitary condition?
Well, the only people I know are the gold panners themselves, the clubs that are going out there and doing some trash pickup.
Okay.
I'm not sure that the county is out there maintaining it. It isn't maintained as open space.
Well, I guess I'm concerned about the extra expense of that, since budgetary restrictions do you perceive that as being significant, or?
I don't perceive it as being significant. It will impact us to some extent, but I also plan on engaging those user groups to help with that.
Their own self.
There are several very active gold panning clubs, and they're very interested in seeing this land used and the gold panning be recreational in nature So I'm hoping this impact will not be significant for that reason, as well as I don't expect a lot of trash to be out there. And we're already have an easement from the county for the trail, so we maintain the trail, 15 feet both sides of the trail.
I guess if that becomes burdensome, then it might behoove us to contact the county and say, can we share on some of this maintenance if it becomes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's a good idea.
Any other questions or comments before we move on? Oh, Mr. Tucker?
Joyce, I didn't see, we're not making any payments to the county to lease this, are we?
We are not.
And when I think of gold panning, and maybe I'm a little naive and I've never really panned for gold, maybe once. Gold pan that you shake around with and then pick out your gold out of it. Does this get much more extensive with sluice boxes and other sort of equipment?
Well, yes and no. What it does, they do use sluice boxes, and the issue is really that they're gas or motorized sluice boxes, and those type of sluice boxes with the motorization, they can move a lot of dirt, so they're more impactful. So that's one issue. Plus, there's a noise issue. There's a perception that they're getting oil and gas in the water, which they may or may not be doing, depending on how responsibly they're using it. So yes, sluice boxes. And then the other issue is that they use shovels to do what they call high banking. So they're digging holes horizontally into the riverbank, and that's damaging the banks. And if you go over into that area, it's been widened out over the years, and that's the main reason. So one of the rules will be that they can only do vertical digging below the water line, because obviously then the sediment fills in right away afterwards, and then no motorized equipment.
And you could only do this during the daytime?
Well, we would treat it, a good question, we'd treat it like our open space, open from sunup to sundown.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pond?
So the Parks Department staff is going to set up the rules and regulations, is that correct?
Well, with the user groups, I've told them that as soon as I have direction from council and whether you're interested in pursuing this, we'll have a meeting with all the user groups, Jefferson County Open Space, who does allow gold panning up in Clear Creek, up Highway 6. They have a gold panning park up there. So we'll get all the user groups together and we'll all decide on the rules. And they all are really in agreement. There isn't a lot of conflict. It's a few what they call, I think they call them wildcatters or something along those lines that come in and with the motorized equipment.
But at the end of the day, after trying to get the user groups together and determine what the best group of regulations is, you will make that recommendation, and as a Parks and Recreation function, that'll be posted and enforced. And then does the Parks and Rec Commission end up getting involved in this in any way, have any responsibility?
Well, just from an informational standpoint, we're meeting Wednesday night of this week, and I'll be having the conversation with them as well.
And then I guess the one thing, I guess, just slightly unclear, you're talking about user groups that are club-based and all that, but I would assume that this is open to anyone who would want to drive down and park and walk in and read the sign and do it?
Correct.
Okay.
Anybody have a problem with this moving forward? It'll come back as a resolution, you said, to council?
It is coming back next week as a resolution to approve the lease. If council is interested, I did say that I would bring back a resolution adopting the rules, which we did with the no smoking in parks and open space. It gives it a little bit more formality, and the resolution number can be quoted on the sign. And even though it's still voluntary compliance, I think that's helpful.
Does anybody have a problem with that moving forward to next meeting? Okay, Joyce.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
So we'll move on to item 3, which is licensing of dogs. And oh, she's not here yet, so we're gonna have to skip 3 for now because we're waiting for one more person. So we'll go to item 4, which is the Animal Welfare Control Commission discussion on using a meeting facilitator. Chief? Thank you, Joyce. Oh, I got your message. Thanks for taking care of things.
I'd invite the members of the commission, if you want to come up to the table as well. And I'm going to turn this, Mayor, over to Division Chief Lawrence to update everybody.
Commander? Chief?
So at a recent study session, we had gotten direction from council to have a facilitator at the Animal Welfare Control Commission meetings, among some other things that were suggested in there, which all of those things we had talked about at recent meetings, and the consensus, actually the unanimous decision of the commission, was that they did not want to use a facilitator, citing that they felt that they were able to do it with assistance from staff and from the city attorney's office, and the expense. We did get 3 different facilitators that have been used at various things within the city in the past, and the cost was anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. So that their decision was that they would try to continue to do this, and if they felt like they would need a facilitator later on, then we would go back and address that. But we also need the direction from council to say, is that okay to do, or do you want to have a facilitator? So
I think the night of that meeting, council was somewhat split on having a facilitator, and the consensus was like 5 or 3 to move forward with a facilitator, but they're back here asking to forego that. Does anybody have any comments or questions on that? I would agree with them not to have a facilitator, but Mr. Stites?
Yeah, I think, as long as both parties are agreeable, it's not for us to force it on them, so I would let them try it. So I have no problem with it.
Mr. DeMott? You okay? Mr. Reinhardt? Mr. Starker? I'm good with it. Mr. Pond?
I'm kind of good with it, which is to say that I understand the reasoning for not wanting to expend what I think seems like a bit of money for the thing. However, I'm cautious about some of these items. Item number 2 specifically, I think that's a heavy lift. From what I saw in the last meeting, for this commission and staff to work together to figure out roles, including topics as serious as the role of the commission itself and its existence. So, yes, I support not having a facilitator. However, I don't think we should step down from any of these topics in terms of making sure that they're being fleshed out. And I think if we're unable to get through those conversations in a reasonable way, then we're going to have to reconvene and figure out what to do. This is not, in my mind, kind of kicking the can down the road and not getting anywhere. So I understand it, but I think there's some hard conversations inside of these 4 points or so that still need to happen. So however we can help that to happen, we should consider.
Ms. J?
George makes some valid points. The mutual parties have apparently wanted to work this out. Of course, I would have to support their decision as well, though, as be available if needed to go ahead and support a facilitator if at any point the working parties felt they needed it.
So would council be okay with the general guidelines that move forward without a facilitator, but if you run into a snag where they can't work together, come back right away with the idea of a facilitator coming forward? Anybody have a problem with that from the staff level?
Well, I think our intent, from the PD's perspective and what I've been told from the Animal Welfare Commission perspective, is to try to work through all of these issues. And the other piece of that is we would report out on those issues to council. And if we come to a disagreement or we're not able to do that, I think, from the PD perspective, and I think from the Animal Welfare Commission perspective, if I can speak on their behalf, we want to work through these things. I think we both want this to be successful. And we want a positive outcome for the city, and really animals and the residents of the community. So we're willing to do what we need to do, and I think they're willing to do what they need to do. So, and we'll report out. We'll have some additional staff reports in the future, and we can talk about these specific issues.
That work for everybody? Cool. Okay, thanks. We'll move on to item 5, which is Jefferson County Regional Crime Laboratory, IGA. Chief? Oh, come on forward. Do you want to introduce our guests here?
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you, Mayor. We have Division Chief Jeff Schrader from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office has been the lead with Jefferson County in terms of the Regional Crime Lab, and then Division Chief Casa has been part of a core group of senior managers from other local jurisdictions that have been working with the Sheriff's Office in regards to this regional lab. So I'm going to give just a real brief overview of this concept and why we think it's a good deal for the citizens of Wheat Ridge, and I'll let Division Chief Casa and then Division Chief Schrader comment as well. Currently, when we have evidence of related to, for instance, DNA, firearms, tool marks, certain kinds of blood work, we do what just about every other jurisdiction in Colorado does. We send those items to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, who has the state crime lab and partly has responsibility for the processing forensically of those items. In all of those items, you can have evidence that is related to persons crimes like homicides, assaults, sex assaults, and you can have DNA evidence and other kinds of evidence that's related to property crimes, motor vehicle thefts, burglaries, arsons, those kinds of things. With the exception of the city and county of Denver, that currently is the only other county to have their own regional forensic crime lab, every law enforcement jurisdiction at the local level and the county level and frankly the state level sends all of their significant forensic crime processing to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. So because they do this on a statewide basis, we oftentimes on some persons-related crimes and property-related crimes are put in, I'll call it the queue, but it's sort of their backlog because they're always in the process of trying to do forensic examination and get forensic lab results on the most serious of cases. And so it creates a backlog in property cases. So I'll give you an example of what that looks like. We had an auto theft a number of years ago where we recovered a ball cap. And we were able to do, a swab of the inside of that ball cap. And by the time we got the DNA results back from that, which identified a suspect who was currently in prison, the statute of limitations was about up. And it didn't make sense to bring that case forward for prosecution because there was no way that we were going to be able to get a case done in time. So the city's also aware that all of the CEOs and agencies in Jefferson County have been looking at the services that we provide as individual agencies to try to find ways to regionalize from two perspectives. One, to be more effective, to bring a better level of service to the citizens in each of our respective communities, and two, sort of a cost-saving effort in terms of how can we maximize the services that we offer and reduce duplicity and those kinds of things. So the Communication Center regionalization study, the joint SWAT teams, the regionalized police academy that Jeffco and Lakewood brought together are all examples of some recent regionalization efforts that have, hopefully will show, some cost savings and more importantly will show a better level of service to our citizens. So a couple of years ago, the Sheriff's Office was looking at pretty significant expansion and remodeling of their crime lab, and the discussion of how can we do a better job from a county perspective in terms of really significant forensic laboratory examination. How can we do a better job of that? And out of that, the cities of Golden, Arvada, Lakewood, Wheat Ridge, and Jefferson County all started to sit around a table and say, should we develop and have our own forensic crime lab to look specifically at the areas of DNA, firearms and tool analysis, some blood work, and latent fingerprint examination. And out of that discussion came, the proposal that you have before you today to develop an IGA and to approve an IGA that would actually result in the creation of possibly a third or fourth, depending on where a couple other counties are, of forming their own regional crime lab to do the kinds of forensic lab examinations that are currently being done by CBI. Now, this particular one comes with a caveat because there's a cost associated with the regionalization, but we think it's money well spent from the perspective of making us more effective and efficient as a police department in regards to the examination of forensic evidence. In this particular one, we came up with, it's actually a dual funding stream. With the expansion of Jeffco's crime lab, both the city of Arvada, that currently has a forensic crime lab, and the city of Lakewood, with their forensic crime lab, are going to send personnel from their agencies to this new regional lab to sort of consolidate the services that these three labs do. Now, we gave up our forensic crime scene processing several years ago to the city of Lakewood. So the council doesn't get confused, what we asked Lakewood to do for us was to provide crime scene techs that would actually go out to our scenes and process our really significant crime scenes, whether those were homicides, serious assaults, or sex assaults. And they also did some laboratory work that they would continue to do in this new facility, but they didn't do the DNA stuff. They didn't do the firearms and the tool marks. They didn't do some of the blood serology stuff because that all has to be sent to CBI. So that's what this new laboratory would have the capability of doing for us. The communities of Arvada, Lakewood, and Golden are all in the process of adopting the IGA. The county commissioners have approved that. And the funding for a lot of the laboratory in terms of the purchasing of equipment is going to be handled a couple of different ways. First, Jefferson County's capital improvement program is going to pay for not only the renovation of their crime lab and the expansion of that lab, but also pay for some of the equipment. And then the other equipment that can't be purchased, we have agreed as CEOs that we'll look to our justice assistance grants and also the seizure funds that each of our agencies have and the seizure funds that the West Metro Drug Task Force has as efforts to try to fund these additional resources. Now, in terms of our funding, the funding's going to look like this. The lab is anticipated to open in 2014, so we have used a funding model that looks at the total number of sworn officers that we have and also our Part 1 crimes, UCR crimes, that's Uniform Crime Reporting. Those are the most serious crimes, so those are your homicides, your sex assaults, your burglaries, your motor vehicle thefts, felony thefts, those kinds of crimes. We looked at our Part 1 crimes and also the number of officers that we had, and using that funding mechanism, we were able to come up with a cost to the city of Wheat Ridge of about $31,000 to $32,000 a year. In 2014, that'll be prorated because the lab won't be open, so it'll be prorated to the number of months that the laboratory will be open, and then it'll be $31,000, $32,000 figure for the upcoming years until there's a justification for an increase. So if I was a city council member, I'd be sitting back there saying, well, Chief, what's the benefit to the city of Wheat Ridge? Well, here's the benefit to the city of Wheat Ridge. I think that it ultimately helps make our community a safer community. Currently, when we send items to CBI, unless it's a priority case like a homicide or a pretty significant case, we go into a queue, and short of a call from the chief of police to the CBI director, things that go in there are done on a first come, first serve and a priority basis. So there are some crimes that may not get processed at all, or may get delayed in being processed. And a lot of our property crimes right now, from a DNA perspective, even though we're taking DNA swabbings from those, aren't processed right away unless there's a phone call that's made, by the chief to the CBI director. So to give you an example of that, this past year we had a series of burglaries that were occurring on the east end of the city in the Sheridan to Harlan corridor, and we had about 6 of those, and we'd recovered a backpack in one of those burglaries that had been left by the suspects. These folks were known to be gang members and known to be armed. Had we just sent in the stuff that we needed to be processed, we would have been looking at months, if not a year, to be processed. But we needed that DNA evidence to confirm who we suspected of doing these crimes. And it took a phone call from the chief to the CBI director to move that up in the queue. With this new crime lab, the feeling and the consensus by the CEOs is we'll be able to get evidence processed at a quicker rate. Jeffco currently has one DNA analyst that they have at CBI that they'll be bringing back to their home office with the intention of hiring a second full-time DNA evidence person, and then adding the addition of a firearms and tool mark expert. So our feeling is we'll be able to get evidence examined sooner and quicker, which will make us more efficient and effective in terms of bringing suspects to justice quicker. So I'm going to ask Joe to just touch on anything that I've missed, and then have Jeff Schrader add to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the chief has given you a very detailed account of what we've done, so I won't belabor that point any further. But what I do want you to know is that we have spent as a committee considerable time, a lot of due diligence and a lot of thought on looking at all the options that we as a police department had, and what was certainly in what we feel is the best interests of our citizens and within our community. It's been very thoughtful. It's been a long process, but I think well worth the effort. To kind of conclude with that, Division Chief Schrader has done an excellent job with this. He has brought together all these different communities and has really spearheaded this project, and certainly without his leadership and direction, we probably wouldn't be before you this evening. So I certainly support the IGA and entering this, and hope that you look at it favorably. Thank you.
Joe, thank you for the nice comments. Pleasure to be in front of everybody tonight. Happy to answer any questions in a moment, but a couple of things without going into any detail that has already been mentioned. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office does have a full-time crime lab. We do not have DNA or tool or Primark evaluation in that crime lab at this point in time. Those are areas that when we did a master plan, we did intend to expand, and those things were going to be in the crime lab that we're going to have. So it was just a responsible conversation to have with the other jurisdictions in Jefferson County. If we're going to be building this, what would it take to make this regional versus what we were going to do anyway? And the reality is we had to add 2 cubicles to what the lab would be. A couple additional thoughts is, as this IGA gets approved in all of the cities, there will be a board that will be formed because of it. And as Chief Brennan mentioned, there will be the opportunity to create priorities. And as we move along, there will be opportunity as that board determines to reset the priorities of what goes on in the crime lab. For example, if our DNA processing is too slow, there will be opportunity to reallocate a position from another area in the crime lab when it's vacant to DNA. Now, that's certainly a specialty. We just can't take somebody right off the street or right from a different profession into DNA analysis, but those opportunities are there with local control. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that the Jefferson County Sheriff's Crime Lab is nationally accredited. The agency is nationally accredited, like the Wheat Ridge Police Department is, through the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. But the Crime Lab is nationally accredited through ASCLD Lab. I can't remember what that acronym is. You'll just have to trust me that it's a national accreditation. We are in our reaccreditation period with that process, and we anticipate that we'll be successfully accredited here very shortly. As we move into these other disciplines, the DNA and the Toolmark, Primark, there will be additional proofs of compliance that we'll have to demonstrate for those sciences. But based upon the track record that we've had, I'm confident that those will occur. And I believe that our accreditation, our lab accreditation, is amongst the first in the state of Colorado.
Any questions or comments on the IGA? Is that be coming forward soon, Chief?
I believe it'll be on the July 22nd council meeting.
Mr. Stark?
Thank you for the presentation. After the capital construction is done, what do you estimate the annual operating cost to be for the facility?
But that's a tough question because this facility, it will be conjoined to the current sheriff's complex, and the utilities, the heat, all of that, which is all being upgraded as part of this project that's going on as in a separate structure, will all be managed under the sheriff's current budget as well as the county's budget. The overall operational cost for the crime lab, for the municipal partners that will be participating, my recollection is total of about $250,000. And so those are the costs above what we would be expending anyway. Again, the view that we had on it was that if we're just adding 2 cubicles, we don't need to get into the detail of how much heat and but the operating costs for phone use, those are kind of factored into that roughly $250,000 that's allocated amongst the municipal agencies that are participating.
Mr. Pond?
Along that line, so I'm looking at Exhibit A. That's the $250,000 dispersed between the 4 agencies. So then there's provision in the contract for other parties coming into the agreement, which I assume would then kind of reallocate the annual expenditures moving forward. I assume down because we'll be sharing more, but I assume that you have more work to do, so that may not be perfect math. But if more people come on board, more people sharing the cost, it could become less expensive on a yearly basis.
That would be true.
And then what I didn't see, and maybe I didn't read carefully enough, is there a prescribed in the contract cycle for reevaluating the cost and reassessing the cost?
There is. Okay. Basically, it's annually. However, since the first year will be a portion of a year, it didn't make sense to do it. That evaluation is called for to be done about the middle of the year, the May-June timeframe. The lab will be opening about the first week of April next year. So we're going to go about a year and a half before that evaluation gets done.
And in that will fall in line with our budgeting procedure. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Reinhardt?
You know, anytime somebody wants to staff something with a relatively small number of FTEs, the question I always am interested in is whether it's sort of optimal. We're trying to avoid a situation where we don't get enough response time out of the current system, but did we analyze the number of people that had to be there and the anticipated usage in a way that there'd be a surplus of capacity, or do we anticipate that the anticipated staffing is a match to capacity? How did we look at that question?
Actually, several different ways. We did try to look at it from a capacity standpoint. What kind of work could we do? One of the difficult issues to analyze is what are the priorities, because we know that there's more cases that we could spend more time on. So some of that is just going to have to come with time as priorities get evaluated. But we did do an analysis of all of the agencies for the work that gets submitted to their local crime lab, or the sheriff's office in this case, or to CBI collectively, and to make the best guess as to what that staff level would look like. And in particular, based upon what we submit for the DNA collectively, all agencies inclusive, it appears that the 2 FTE that would be managing the DNA work would be greater in terms of FTE capabilities than what is being experienced now.
So did you just say there's a little bit of surplus capacity in there? And
I think I did. I'm just not as smart as an engineer.
Oh, come on, don't give me that. All that does is mean that I'm overly focused on the wrong question. But you said you have, I think you said you actually have, in that particular function, more ability. If the load went up, you would still have the capacity to absorb it, is what I think you said.
We believe that we will. And I think the chief can probably attest to this, but we do have limits on what will be tested at CBI now that we could have different policy on.
Right.
For example, on a case, we're limited on some of those property crimes that don't have a suspect to 2 items to be tested. We could increase that to 5, and that would increase the workload, if that makes sense. So
there's a latent capacity need for more testing than's doable within any system. You can keep testing it. Okay, but I'd hate to think we were in the business of simply testing because we had the capacity too. So anyway, all right. Thank you.
Questions or comments more? I guess the question is, anybody have an issue with this bringing forth on the July 22nd council meeting for approval?
I think it could be very valuable in the sense that it will, the speed of it assists us in getting our crimes down because, as you mentioned, criminal activity, you have more opportunity to process the evidence and get to those criminals sooner. So it could bring our crime rate down.
I don't know that it'd bring our crime rate
yeah.
down, but it would help us in the processing of evidence and the identification of criminal suspects and the arrest. So it has the potential to help us increase our solvability factors in regards to making cases.
Yeah, the minute I said that, I thought, plus the victims of crimes might be in a better place.
Absolutely.
For that, especially I think we discussed this before, rape cases. Or does that enter in this at all?
Well, sex assault cases certainly have a DNA component to them, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The risk of going back to, well, just a little bit. So I'm just trying to think of relative costs. In your mind, Chief, investing in this particular expenditure would have more value to us as a community than, say, I guess it'd be on net about 1/3 of another police officer on the street. I mean, you think that, it's a weighing of resource in some way. You feel that this is the best way to put that $30,000 a year to use for the overall performance of your department?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you on the 22nd, I guess. So now we can move on to item 3, which was the ordinance on licensing of dog and cats. I ask our guest to please step forward, and maybe Patrick can introduce her, or Chief can introduce her.
Heather? We're here to talk about dog licensing and a revision to our current ordinances in Chapter 4 as it pertains to dog licensing. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Heather Cameron. Heather is the Executive Director of the Foothills Animal Shelter, and certainly if any members of the Animal Welfare Commission want to come up as this is discussed, you're welcome to come as well. So.
We haven't really been doing that lately unless they were part of the original groups.
Well, if they have any questions.
Okay, come on up.
Comes up. All right. So if council remembers, back in 2012, we created an IGA as it pertains with with Jefferson County, Foothills Animal Shelter, and the other cities, municipalities in Jefferson County to come up with a dog licensing methodology so that we could help fund the Foothills Animal Shelters move from their old facility to their new facility. And I know Heather will correct me if I make any mistakes in this. So that was put in place, and in that initial IGA, Jefferson County was going to be the licensing body in regards to that. They were going to keep track of the dollars that came in. Each community was given a specific assessment or number of dog licenses that they should have in their community based on their population and the households that they had in a particular community. Here recently, as a result of work by the Foothills Animal Shelter Board and Heather Geyer, who sits on that board, and Heather Cameron, who leads that group, Jefferson County has made some suggestions in regards to the revision of that current IGA. And essentially what that IGA does is it takes out all the reference that is in it as it pertains to Jefferson County, and it talks about a licensing authority, and that licensing authority now will be the Foothills Animal Shelter will be responsible for keeping track of that money. Each municipality will still go through its process of issuing dog licenses if citizens come to our community to do that and taking in those dollars, but instead of being sent to Jefferson County, they'll now go to the Foothills Animal Shelter. The other addition to that were some minor revisions as a result of the amendments that Jefferson County made to their ordinance code as it pertains to dog licensing. Council will see that we would like to amend the ordinance to change the requirement for obtaining dog licenses from 6 months to 4 months. That's sort of based on a best business standard, and there's some references there in regards to information that refers to the licensing of cats. So instead of having somebody examine the cat by its mouth to identify its first adult teeth, it will now be changed to having a licensed vet look at that particular animal to address that. So I'll turn this over to Heather and Cameron to see if they have anything else that they would like to add to this. Otherwise, we'll answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Chief. I'd just like to, I'll turn it over to Heather Cameron here in a minute, just acknowledge the work that she's done with the Foothills Animal Shelter. They're very innovative and progressive things that we're working on as a board to look at generating additional revenue for the shelter. What year are we in our new facility?
3 years.
3 years. And with any new facility that's constructed, we've gone through some growing pains, but we're on a really positive track in terms of the changes that we're making to our dog licensing program, and very exciting for what we have to offer the citizens of Jefferson County. So I'll turn it over to Heather. She can tell you more about the dog licensing program and what's happening.
Good evening. How is this? Is this good? Sure. Thanks for having me. I wanted to say just a few things about the licensing program and under the IGA and the changing IGA. Jefferson County really has done a remarkable job managing this program for the shelter, to help build the shelter, and they have put together a great foundation in the program. Our job now is to build that program. We'll be changing the dog licensing administration just a tad bit. You'll now be able to get new licenses online when we take over. There'll be a full marketing campaign. People whose dogs come to us lost and found that are licensed will get a discount on impound, so pet owners who are responsible will be rewarded for that. Every animal that goes out the door will be licensed or will have a voucher to be licensed depending on the age of that animal, and if our doctor can get to it to do a rabies vaccination. Rabies is really key to the licensing program for both cats and dogs to help prevent an outbreak in our community, as I'm sure you're all aware. And certainly the funding to help support the operations of the shelter. We're bringing in 8,000 lost animals a year, and the medical costs for those animals, spay-neuter of those animals, getting those animals home, providing court holds for animals that are vicious, and rabies holds and protective custody holds, and all sorts of services that we provide to law enforcement in our community. That's costly in the maintenance of the building. So this allows us to grow that revenue stream. But even more importantly, this is really about getting lost animals home. Because if you come into a shelter, you find thousands of lost animals that we know have an owner. And we know that because there are cats and dogs and ferrets that brush against cages, want to be pet, are anxious to be touched, will be talked to, can be de-escalated, are terrified to be in an environment that is not natural to them. And the more we can do to identify these animals, the faster we're going to get them home. We also have a lot of Good Samaritans in our community who are returning animals on their own. Under the new program, we'll be working with a vendor called Pet Data out of Texas. They do nothing but licensing administration for over 50 cities in the country, mostly for government entities. And their job is operating a very robust database where people are going to be able to look online. You, for example, if you're a Good Samaritan who finds an animal, you're going to be able to look at the tag, go online, and see where that animal belongs. Not their home, but you'll be able to call an owner and say, I have your Cocker Spaniel, I think, at my house. So more animals will get home through Good Samaritans so they don't have to come to the shelter. And we'll be able to get more animals home faster as a result of the licensing. Now, initially, this is for dogs, and the campaign, you will see a full, beautiful campaign that Barnhart Communications has done up for us pro bono. It'll roll out August 1. Barnhart is known for their work doing the Wyoming campaign, if anybody has been seeing the Wyoming Tourism campaign and the Colorado History Museum campaign. So they are doing a full public education. It'll start August 1 again. You'll see it on buses, light rail, television, radio spots. City of Lakewood has also produced public service announcements that are generic and can be put on any city's government site, television site. Will be on web page as well. So there's going to be a robust campaign. There's going to be animal education. There's going to be incentives to license your animal. It is focused on dogs. However, you'll see little subliminal cats in your ads once in a while because really it's cats that don't get home much more than dogs. So anything we can do to help owners license their cats will be encouraged, but it's not mandatory. And we will continue to microchip every animal that goes out. People will often ask us, why license if I can microchip? And mostly it's because not everybody has a microchip wand to be able to pick up a microchip, but they can read a tag, and they can make a phone call. So with that, I want to open up to any questions you might have about the program.
Heather, could you explain to the revenue about the licensing and the operations in the center? So the more licensing we get.
Yes, the more licensing. That is true. So the cities and the county have agreed. The city of West Wheat Ridge has been hitting a 22% compliance rate. The IGA calls for a 20% minimum compliance rate. So we'll be working very hard with your ACOs. Part of this public education campaign is making sure you can meet that compliance rate. We also have over 55 licensing sites. A lot of people don't know that, but veterinary clinics, all of the cities and the shelter do licensing for you. Regardless of where, if I walk into Lakewood and I live in Wheat Ridge, the compliance rate, that compliance number will go to Wheat Ridge because I'm a resident of Wheat Ridge. So we're building the number of licensing sites we have as well. But yes, it all goes towards you not supporting the shelter through general fund any longer or however that is allocated through your city budget, and instead it's pet owners supporting animal welfare in your community. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you. And if I could just add that this, both the ordinance revisions and Heather's presentation were presented to the Animal Welfare Commission, and they were unanimous in their support of these changes.
So I got to bring this forward on the 22nd also?
Yes.
Any questions or comments on the ordinance coming forward on the 22nd, Monday? we're in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Heather.
Thanks, sure. Good to see you.
Haven't seen you in a while.
3 years. Huh? You'll have to come back.
Okay, it looks like we're going to, Mike, are you leaving? All right. Let's take 5, because we lost everybody. So we'll take 5, and then we'll come back around 8:35. Mr. Dahl, you coming up? Or?
You guys can come up. You guys want to come up? These guys are talkative tonight.
That's all right, so we're going to go ahead and start on item number 6, which is the sales and use tax ballot initiative update. So I guess Mr. Dahl or Mr. Goff? Or Mr.
Yeah, I'll start off. Yep. Thank you, Mayor. Before you this evening is some proposed ballot language for a sales and use tax question, and also some talking points that could be used in addition to the ballot language. As a reminder, we have to have the language to Jefferson County by September 6th, though in order to do that, we'd have to have a first reading on August 12th and a second reading on August 26th. So we brought it forward for discussion tonight. We also could potentially discuss this further on August 5th, shortly before the first reading is due. So attachment 1 is the draft language for ballot question, and as we put in the memo, majority of the language in the first paragraph and the last paragraph are dictated by Tabor, Taxpayer Bill of Rights. That specific language has to be included the way it's written, and it's according to the Taxpayers Bill of Rights is for transparency and making sure that the voters understand the amount of the tax increase. Ms. J called me and asked do you have to have $6 million in there? And yes, you do have to have $6 million in there. And then what the percentage rate is. You do have a little more leeway with some of the language in the center. As you can see, there's some bullet points that we've included, and these are just draft based on some ideas that we thought we heard from council. This is very similar format to what we used on the ballot question in 2004, where we asked for a 1% sales tax increase. Okay. And we did have 3 bullet points in that question also, and they were more specific. At that time, they were for 10 police officers, hiring of 10 police officers. 1 bullet point was for economic development efforts, and 1 bullet point was for to restore some of the staffing in the Parks and Recreation Department after the budget cuts we had in 2002, 2003. So with that, we would like to just have a discussion with you all and see if this is a direction, the right direction you'd like to move forward in. This type of language, verbiage, and Mr. Dahl and Nate are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Pond?
Before we get into wordsmithing or asking questions about that, I actually want to just do a calendar check, make sure I understand a couple of things. So if I look at it, we've got a council meeting next Monday. We've got a District 3 and 4 open house the following Monday, and then this is more or less being called due on the 2nd. You mentioned that we might be able to have this discussion on the 5th. So setting that aside for a second, how would we go about, for instance, if we, for some reason, didn't come to a conclusion of adjusting the language tonight, and we didn't have another business meeting scheduled in order to do that? How would we go about working together to continually adjust this language in a proper format prior to the 2nd? In other words, should we be sending emails back and forth with drafts? Should we? Well, I'm just trying to figure out what's the proper way for us to
You could
navigate.
call a special study session.
Well, okay, you could call a special study
Either
session.
5 of you or I can.
Mayor, let me interrupt. There is time. August 2nd is more of an artificial date. We have a due date of when information is due from staff to me so that we can prepare the packet. So that's the August 2nd date. Ballot language from MDKR, that's Mr. Dahl's firm. So we do have a meeting on August 5th, a study session, where you could discuss this again to finalize the language. And then that would still give us enough time to have it in the packet for the first reading on August 12th. So you have tonight, you got August 5th, and then you can change it after first reading also. But the first reading after August 12th, or amend the first reading on August 12th. You can amend it on second reading.
Okay. All right. So then
Yep.
there's lots of time.
Yep.
That helps. That helps a little bit. But then obviously, if we do get into a dialogue and then we're starting to share thoughts, how are those done in the most appropriate way? Outside of us sharing our thoughts tonight, but it's.
This isn't quasi-judicial.
Okay, so we can.
So, it's not quasi-judicial, it's legislative, so the legislative rules apply. You can call each other up on the phone, you can, have whatever discussion you want offline. And Patrick is right, the real action is in the middle. Is in the purpose, very honestly. I've done a little tuning up of the first and second paragraphs, which you'll see, to add some more language that I've used in other jurisdictions that just tightens it up a little bit and talks about interest income and stuff that's probably only of interest to me. But the policy discussion is really in the bullet points, and as council probably knows, since the enactment of Tabor and various debrucing measures, it has become, I won't say the rule, but certainly a commonly accepted practice that besides just putting in the first and second paragraphs, which are the mechanics, you try to articulate, in many communities, articulate a purpose. And it can get pretty lengthy. This is actually pretty short ballot increase or tax increase ballot measure as compared with others. But there's a couple of ways to articulate the stuff in the middle, and very clearly what it now reads, because of the lead-in language.
Before you go into that, I think Mr. Pond had some more questions.
This might set up your.
All right. Yeah, sure.
This might set up what you're talking about now, just because I think it's.
Sorry.
What you're starting to say is what my next kind of formative question is on this, which is, I look at this and I generally can see what I think you have to do, although I don't really know exactly what the requirements are. So my naive question is that you actually have to have two distinct separate paragraphs, and one of them has to be first and the other has to be second. And because I look at this and ask, why not insert the second essentially statement after the bullets, right after the
the first paragraph.
The first sentence essentially, so that it's a boom. It's a boom boom that you're. It's 6 million through 1%, and it's one statement that's kind of like. And is that against the rules? Okay, that's not.
There's
against,
no rule.
Okay.
You have to say it all, and finish with a question mark.
But you do have to say. The dollar amount first and the percentage second.
That's right.
That is the rule.
The Constitution requires that the ballot measures begin with shall, name of jurisdiction, taxes be increased by blank dollars in the first year.
Okay.
The Constitution requires that. After that, there are things that you're going to need to have. What's the percentage increase? When does it start? And I've added right now it says annually in the first full year, and I've tightened that up to say, commencing in calendar year 2014 and things like that. That's just mechanical for you, but the Constitution requires the first phrase, and I've seen it done a number of ways. I've seen jurisdictions get the percentage up right away and have the reasons that they're wanting it or the reasons they're going to spend it for at the end. I've seen it as kind of a sandwich like we've got here. It's really up to you. There's two major ways to approach the material in the middle, and the way it's approached here is this is what we intend to spend it for, but not exclusively, which very much means, and is a real important point to make, that you're not restricted to this. So while this is a general expression, it's not earmarking, and that's the other way to do it, is to earmark and say it's for these specific purposes. We've got a lodger's tax that is earmarked for that, and you can't spend it for anything else. Doesn't matter how much or how little's in there, it's just for that purpose. And that obviously ties your hands a lot more. But those are the two ways to go on the kind of the policy discussion in the middle.
Okay, Mr. Pond?
Yep, thank you. That's
Mr. Starker?
Just in the wordsmithing arena in the fourth line, we talk about the revenues shall be used to invest in the community. And I would suggest that we may want to see the revenues shall be invested in the community, so that it's a more active form rather than the rather more passive use to invest.
Go ahead. Duly noted. Good suggestion.
I'd like to back up for, sorry, I was just going to back up to the process question. What?
Well, you guys got to let me know because someone just starts talking. Just
No, I'm sorry.
Joey, go, and I'll
No, I'm sorry. I apologize.
On the first sentence, is it, it says shall City of Wheat Ridge taxes. Why doesn't it say sales taxes?
Because the Constitution says.
Okay.
These are the words you got to use.
Okay. And then we can't say approximately 6 million or, just because we don't really know.
We don't, but
a percentage.
The Constitution says, shall they be raised by,
okay.
And then you put in the number, and what's very commonly done is you put in a number that's generously high. That's probably higher, you want it to be higher than what you think that will actually raise, because that number has to be at least as high as what you end up collecting by that 1%. If you say 6 million, you end up collecting 6.5. Then if the voters said yes to this, they only authorized you to collect 6 million with that 1%. And when you get to 6 million, you've got to stop collecting. So that's why the number's higher.
But does that, in the last paragraph, we're.
It says and by whatever additional amount.
Yeah, aren't we?
In future years.
Just future years, not the first year?
The first year, you take your best stab, and after that, the constitutional and Tabor only requires you to estimate that first year for the question. Now, the Tabor notice that we send out will have, a range of years, but the question just requires it for the first year.
Okay. So it may not end up. We may have to adjust that number. So just keep that in mind.
Mr. Reinhardt?
Yeah, I went back to where George started, which is the method and means and times for having dialogue on this issue. And I just wanted to make sure that we were all clear that while we can talk to each other about it, the community email broadcast is still off the limits under the Open Records Law, to be clear.
Reply to all is still an electronic meeting.
Yeah.
To avoid.
Thank you.
And that's what I wanted to say to George, is if you wanted to, you could have a special meeting. You can call special meetings within 24 hours notice, 48 hours notice. So if you had to, we can call special meetings for study sessions,
So tonight we'd like to get, just kind of more high, at least to start, some higher level discussion on, what we've heard from you all is that you don't want to earmark specifically. But you did hear from Mr. Hill tonight, and I do agree with him to a certain extent that, the more you at least try to give a perception that it's going to be used for specific purposes, I think the better chance you are going to have to get this sold. So, are these 3 bullet points close to the direction that you're comfortable using or promoting this sales tax increase for?
Mr. Starker?
In that regard, in the first bullet point, I had a couple of wordsmithing things that I would throw out. I think in bullet point number 1, we should talk about road and bridge construction. I think you should have a semicolon there. I think you should add the word stormwater management. And after that, and capital maintenance to provide a safe and pedestrian-friendly.
You said stormwater maintenance? Stormwater maintenance.
And capital maintenance.
And capital maintenance.
Yeah. Just because I think what we're talking about here is generating enough revenue in this city so that we can provide capital infrastructure to make this a safe city to move around in and to live in.
Do you think the average voter knows the words stormwater and capital? I do, obviously, but
I think that after the flood the other night, a lot of them know what stormwater is.
Stormwater is, yep. I don't know what else you would call it.
You want to say stormwater or just drainage?
Either way. Yeah.
Stormwater is really the
I guess that's a common term, right? Stormwater.
Ms. J?
Okay.
Did I understand this, that we could rearrange this, meaning that increase by 6 million, and then going into quickly as to how that's
through a 1%
achieved?
increase.
That through 1%, because
Yeah.
starts clarifying it right away.
Yeah, you move the 1% up to after the 6 million calendar year 2014.
Right. That seemed,
By a 1% increase, or 1%, et cetera, and by whatever additional amount.
right. I think it's really important that the citizens have a very clear understanding of what they're voting for, both, not only that it will pass, but that the citizen who may not pass it because of lack of clarity and would not be very happy with themselves for that. You know, it's a goal here, community goal. And this pedestrian-friendly transportation system, I don't understand that. I mean, certainly I understand it, but it feels not very concrete. It feels not, and you know, concrete is always a good one. And I could see calling this provide a safe, solid, dependable, you know, those sorts of words in there. But this pedestrian-friendly, is there another way of saying that it's more clear as to what we're doing with that?
Multimodal transportation system. That's kind of vague too for the average voter, I think.
Provide.
I like that better, but I do understand that a lot of people would not understand that, because when I first heard it, I went, what's that?
I don't know, provide multiple facilities for safe pedestrian travel. Then you're talking more about concrete.
Facilities is too.
Facilities.
Sounds like buildings.
Okay, we'll find a different word than facilities, but it would be a noun.
Yeah. Just remember, I mean, not to be negative about our citizens that are voting, but you need to be
really clear.
probably writing for a third grade audience, basically, which
Right.
were always taught to do. That's not a criticism of anybody, but just remember that we're used to these terms. The average person isn't. So.
And they don't want to get into it and start reading and say, no, God.
Yeah.
Just vote no.
Yep.
Or yes, you know.
Mr.
Okay.
Pond? Mr. Pond, you have some?
Yeah, I am, sorry.
Well, I'll pick up on Bud's comment. I agree with it. The last piece of it, I might say two things. One, I don't feel like the term infrastructure is necessarily too much of a heavy lift, and so I might say infrastructure. I might say city infrastructure, community infrastructure.
Where, Mr. Pond? Where are you? First bullet point.
After friendly.
Yeah.
Friendly.
After friendly.
Strike transportation, put in infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Add community, add city.
Public.
I'm not, public, right. Thank you. And although I think we've got to be careful, this is not strictly as much as I'm for pedestrian systems and other things like that. That's not strictly what we're talking about here. So I think that is somewhat limiting in language as well. So it either
Actually,
could be
I
expanded.
want to support that too, because I don't think that's, I mean, a large part of this to me is about the ability to just do street overlays and so forth. So to be assigning it to some thing like pedestrian friendly seems to, I'm talking about pipes and paving myself. And
So if I can make a suggestion, I'm going to go back for a second and just kind of make a comment for the sake of it, and just to be honest about my general take on this. I completely understand and appreciate the comments either that we've had together and or comments like Mr. Hill's comments earlier this evening as it relates to specificity within this request. I don't want to dismiss that in any way. However, I will say if we're going to like literally earmark it, you're talking about like earmarks. In fact, maybe we should be talking about it an altogether different mechanism. That sounds like a different thing, like that we should. But we did talk about this, and so I'm going to kind of bring my memory back on this and say that we talked about, and I suppose it's awkward and we're struggling with this, but we talked about both specific things that we do struggle with and general things that we struggle with. And because of that, I mean, they're all struggles, and they're about fiscal sustainability, and they're about providing the services of this community. But they're not so specific that we can, I think, fairly earmark these things. If they were, we would have, I think, made a different decision. I would have made a different decision and made it and said something different when we were talking about this. So I think we're struggling a little bit with that. I think it's a fair struggle. We're probably going to struggle with it for a couple more weeks, and that's, I think, fine. But coming back to that, I think we should try to be specific where we can be specific and try to be honest about the general nature of this, where it should be general, where what we're actually saying is we're asking for this funding in order to provide general services at a level that we think meets the requirements of moving forward in this city. Anyway, so that's just a point on, why we're whatever. I mean, that we're struggling with this idea of earmarking versus not. Getting back to this, I might say, based on the conversation we just had before my little soapbox about, that maybe these are two bullets. Maybe there's something about capital improvement projects that, that talk about projects in a more like bike ped master plan, parks infrastructure content, and then one that really is about bricks and mortar underground facilities, things like that, and road overlays and things like that, because I think we are saying all of those things, but they are somewhat different in nature, and maybe they take either an expanded definition and or 2 bullet points to hit that. And then I might just say that we haven't kind of jumped down to this, but bullets 2 and 3 don't really resonate with me, and maybe I'm not, they're not jumping off the page to me. Maybe that's because I can only read at a 3rd grade level, and they're not grabbing me, and so I think we probably need to.
But are the topic areas? I mean,
well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Frankly, I look at it and go, I'm not exactly sure.
That's kind of the direction we're looking for.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about economic development, revitalization? I mean, the words can change. Do you want to talk about technology?
I guess I need to understand the need, and maybe for some reason I missed that context in a previous discussion.
Revitalization efforts?
Go for it.
I don't recall discussing technology improvements for Mauritian government at all. Now maybe that's just I was asleep because I only listen to half of what's going on. Sometimes it feels like, but to me it could be as simple as the first bullet point I'm pretty comfortable. I think the second bullet point should. I think it's maintenance of existing systems, capital improvements to performance of our infrastructure, and a third point which says something like investing in capital projects that support the growth of our community. I mean, something as direct as we are going to spend money on capital projects that directly support business growth in our community or something like that. That's where I'd go.
For the second, instead of the second, or a different version of the second.
Some version of the second one, right? I don't have a lot of use for the first, and I'd get rid of. I mean, there's a lot of buzzwords floating around: multimodal, new tourism, bike friendly. I think that only speaks to half the community. I think that, for me, the truth is we're trying to underwrite a need we have to sustain our basic infrastructure and to support the growth of our community. And I'd like to get into a broader reach of people. And I'm usually the last guy who wants to wordsmith, but I think that's a core approach that's a little different from what's in this.
George?
I just wanted to support the notion that if by revitalization, Patrick, you were getting towards that idea of, what you were just saying, Davis, capital improvements to improve the, viability or the economic development or whatever it is of our community. If that's what you were getting.
That's the general topic, yes.
Yeah.
But how it's worded.
Actually, Bud had to tell me that's what it was at the
maybe
break.
that. Yeah, I wasn't writing in 3rd grade language, so yeah.
Referring to it as, thank you, deferred maintenance. We have both deferred maintenance on our streets as well as our deferred maintenance on our vehicles. And there's also, if I recall correctly, we have a problem with unpaid leave. That need is building up. I mean, yes, no, don't want to mention it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something you'd probably want to put on a ballot question, but it's not a problem. It's just a liability issues that the auditors always put in their report. But yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we want a clause that says we'd really like to raise the taxes to pay the government workers
vacations.
the past money that we didn't really pay them before. I don't think that floats so well. Sorry,
All right, scratch that.
I'm sorry, Joyce. I'm badly mischaracterizing.
You're bad over there. I mean, it's something we genuinely have to pay, like it or not.
Yeah.
But the deferred maintenance on both equipment as well as the roads is, and we have a figure on that, how much deferred maintenance we have in both areas. I don't know if you can use that or not.
Yeah. Deferred capital maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mr. Starker?
I mean, I would probably go with capital maintenance rather than deferred maintenance. At some point, we may not have deferred maintenance. We may just have regular capital maintenance. And so, but I also would, when in bullet point number 1, and that's really to me the meat of the issue, you know, talk about really not pedestrian-friendly transportation system. To me, it's really safe and effective public infrastructure system. You know, so we have road and bridge construction, stormwater drainage, and capital maintenance to provide a safe and effective public infrastructure system.
I'll read what I have.
Okay.
Road and bridge construction, stormwater drainage management, and capital maintenance to provide a safe and effective city infrastructure system.
Yeah.
Is that closer to covers?
It works for me. I think we're pushing it into that broader category and getting away from the buzzwords.
Yeah. Okay. And the second one I've put in investing in capital projects that support the business growth of our community as a start. That, again, that gets to the revitalization efforts, economic development, which you know you could use some of those words.
It might mean to me supporting a Cabela's project with another intersection or something that we need to kick it off. Something
Do you want to be that straightforward about it? Investing in capital projects that support the business growth of our community. Yeah. Yep. And no, we don't have to have a third. Third, I didn't like either. There is something to say about providing, you know, having the funding to make sure that we are working efficiently and effectively. And there are major technology improvements that the city needs in PD that are going to be very expensive. I'm not real supportive of technology improvements in there either. I'm not sure how supportive that would be, but just the concept of having the funds so that we can work efficiently and effectively as a government by having the right type of technology and equipment and resources.
Isn't efficient and effective government an oxymoron?
Sounds like you want to give everybody a cell phone.
Yeah.
We do that now.
Yeah, exactly. So we can totally get rid of that third board. And if there's another general topic that we want to cover, you've all brought up kind of different areas.
Anybody else before I go to Mr. Joe? We'll go to Joe and then Mr. Pond.
Well, you know, you were talking about technology improvement. You used a couple of the words that I had down: resource improvements and equipment improvements. Other than that, I don't really know. On that first one, you know, road and bridge, stormwater, and CIP, to provide a safer transportation network is kind of what I had, but I don't know if network is the word you know. I just think transportation system sounds like RTD or something like that, and
we changed it to city infrastructure system. Safe and effective city. Do you want safer and effective city infrastructure system?
No, that doesn't make sense. To use safer and effective. Safe and effective.
I think people have really got a good grasp of infrastructure anymore.
Yeah.
And you've used the word in that first paragraph, first bullet point of effective, and that's vague to me. What does that mean, effective? Is there something that's a little more visually or emotionally?
Safe.
Got a bigger tag.
And
Effect.
Reliable.
Effective mobility.
Effective mobility.
That's what you're talking about, someone getting from A to B, whether it's a pedestrian, a bike, or a road. So you got to talk about mobility, I think.
Yeah. Mobility friendly was my comment.
Mr. Pond?
I come back around on a comment I think we made 2 or 3 times, but I suppose, see where everyone's at with it. My gut is that I don't like the sandwich format as much as the entree format, which would put all of it up in the front, which is to say that I'm inclined to see the increase to the city sale and use tax rate of 1% try to move up as close to in context the 6
We've got
million
that noted.
as possible. All right, I didn't know if you
Yep.
did that. All right.
Got that. Yep.
But I mean, I've only heard, Joyce and I said that. I don't know if everyone else is.
I think we all got it. Yep.
It's still going to probably have to end, as they all do, with so that you can actually have a question. It's a little awkward to have the question mark after, say, the last bullet point in the middle, and typically you end with saying, "And shall the city be able to, collect, retain, and expend these funds and any interest," which I've added, without regard to the limitations of, of Tabor, question mark.
So I think it's also important to get to the more friendlier language too, so that people don't get ballot weary and they read all this legal stuff and they say, I'm not going to read the rest of the question. So there's a balance there, I think.
Technology improvements for more efficient government operations? Question mark?
I think they were taking that one out. So.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying, put a question mark behind it.
No, question mark.
I'm going to read it one more time, too, if I could, just like you, just to put a bug in your ear. Resource improvements for more efficient government operations and public safety.
Mr. Bond?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe, because I was just going to say that when you tried to restate it even before, I feel better about that third bullet point when you kind of put it into that context, which is to say you have articulated a need. We had a topic on our agenda tonight about a resource need. So I think that's totally valid. So I agree with that.
Resource. Can you repeat that, Mr.
Could you
DeMont?
repeat that? I thought that was good.
Well, I just put resource in there, but where it says technology. Resource improvements for more efficient government operations and public safety. I just changed the first word and added public safety.
What, do you want to give Dan some more money?
No helicopters.
Any other comments or questions before this comes back again? Looks like you got enough notes?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other feedback? Okay. So we'll go on to elected officials reports. Joe and I had talked to some folks over there in District 2 near Randall Park. Did you want to bring up that, Joe, since you're on the prevailing side of a consensus?
Yeah, after the meeting last week, had little to do with the meeting, but a few of the neighbors around there, 3 different families actually came in. We were talking about it, and one thing I asked them about was the park, Randall Park. We'd been approached 2-3 months ago about purchasing the that house on the corner, and I just sort of blindsided them and said, what do you just out of curiosity, what would you have thought? I actually voted against purchasing that. And every single one of them, I mentioned to them it would be, we'd have to purchase it and there'd be some improvements, and half of it or part of it would come from open space funds and stuff. And there would be a cost to buying it. There would be a cost to, rehabbing it, putting a parking lot or whatever we decide to put. And every single one of them I would say was upset that we didn't do it. and the other two were, thought that would be a great addition to their neighborhood. Some of them, well, they'd all actually probably lived there over 20 years. I've known them for a long time. But, most of them just thought it would really improve the looks and the aesthetics and the layout of the park. And some had concerns about the way the house looked in general, about, just getting rid of it. So I kind of just thought maybe I'd just bring it up and see if there was any interest in maybe looking at that again, having Joyce Manwaring make some calls and see about what, if that house is still for sale and still owned by the same owner as before. There's not a for sale sign up front, but I don't think there ever was.
And the thing is that buying that piece of property and completing it was it's part of your parks master plan that's been approved by the Parks Commission and the City Council over the years. So it's not like you're jumping into something that wasn't planned on before, but it's definitely a change that I think it's a positive change. So discussion on Mr. DeMott's request?
I don't remember anymore what the estimated price was.
Well, $175,000.
I don't think we ever got an exact, because we didn't even go to the appraisal.
Yeah, I believe there was an asking price. I think it was like about $175,000, and at that time when we first brought it to you, we could have used an open space grant or something from Jefferson County of $100,000. They would have reimbursed us, but I'm not sure if that grant is still available. But we could ask Joyce that.
Mr. Starker?
Do we have any technical issues with respect to bringing this back to consideration?
No, it was a consensus. It wasn't on a regular meeting. So discussion on Mr. Starker?
Well, if I recall, I was in favor of purchasing the property.
Right.
So I would support a move to bring it back to consideration.
All in favor of it? Is that a consensus? All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to revisiting it. No, well, I'm neutral, but I'm not opposed to revisiting it. Well, that's why we got, yeah.
Yeah, it was a while ago. I didn't mean to blindside you, but
No, it's cool.
It's funny that it came up 3 times in this week, and I was like,
Mr. Starker again?
Because I voted against it too, actually.
So did I. Yeah.
Last time.
The one thing about that, it's the only piece of property on the block that doesn't go with the park. So I've always thought that if you have an opportunity in the long range planning to consolidate your real estate for public improvements, that if you can get a logical geographical boundary and to consolidate that, and it's within the financial resources and it makes sense to do it, you should take a look at it. So that's just my rationale for it.
So would council, I was just talking to Patrick, would council have a problem with putting this on the 22nd as just a discussion with Parks Director here on?
Is it a regular meeting or a study session?
Regular meeting, just to discuss it, and then you could direct staff to do it or not do it. Because I think time is of some essence because of, it's.
Can we direct staff to put the facts together for?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Joyce, if we can pull it together, if we can't get a hold of the property owner, but we can try, but I'm not sure if we'll have enough information for you guys to make a decision by next Monday.
We can give you direction to put the whole package together now, right?
Yeah.
And then, let's face it, on the 5th, is that?
Right, so
Yeah,
there's,
I think what I can remember is part of the direction, or actually the direction I think was to hire an appraiser, right? Or to get an appraisal of the property was, I think, the first point that she had.
Yep.
And
yeah, I guess the packet was
so that
together
would
already.
probably be
It's
the
just
direction that we can give tonight, if everybody's okay.
Is the direction if the property's still available to get an appraisal? Can we go that, or are we ready to go that far?
Joyce, can you use the mic?
As well, regarding funding for it, that's just really important.
yeah. Joyce will have to look at our budget to see if she may have reallocated available resources to other projects by now. I don't know. I'll have to ask her to look at that and see if a grant would be available and see if it's still available for purchase.
So what day do you want this to come back? Of the 5th or the 22nd?
I think the 5th is soon enough, provided we give them enough direction to keep moving if it's positive. You know, if it's still available and if the funding are still available, then go ahead and get appraisal. If not, then we'll talk about it without those things on the 5th. Is that correct?
I mean, to be clear, I wasn't here for the previous discussion, so it's hard for me. I'm just kind of letting you guys sort it out. I don't oppose to it, but I don't have enough information to.
Well, she had a packet that night, so she can bring that back.
I'm sure I can. Yeah. All right.
I mean, generally in the past, anytime we've purchased these pieces of land, open space has been part of it some way or the other. So it's always half or all of it, which is a good deal.
I said there was only 6 of us there that night, but I couldn't remember.
No, it was 7. The only person missing was George.
Oh, okay.
So is the consensus to move forward with an appraisal if it's available for purchase before the 5th even, or at least get one started? Is that what I heard?
Everybody agree with that?
Okay. Got it.
We'll contact the owner, looking for an appraisal if there's still available. Look at open space funding, all those packages, bring it for the 5th.
Okay.
Appraisal, contacting the owner, open space funding versus our funding, and a package.
The way I heard it was if it passes the two first hurdles, availability and funding availability, then get the appraisal and bring it back. Either way, bring it back, but don't spend the money on the appraisal. Well, we want to know what happens either way, I guess. Yeah.
Fight anyway. Can we add one more from Mr. DeMott?
Concerning the Wheatridge Business District, we had last year received a $20,000 from council for what we called our new accessibility grant, and we have expended those funds. And as the new chair of the Wheatridge Business District, I guess it's on my shoulders to come forward and ask about additional funding for the accessibility grant. It's definitely become more popular, and it's for. We've definitely sort of refined it. We've definitely found what we consider part of the accessibility part of a restroom. As opposed to decorative or, just updating. We've done a couple for ramps outside, just general accessibility into a building. We'll mention it at our next meeting, but I just wanted to mention that we have spent all that and we may be looking for another pot of money.
I'm in favor of doing that. I guess what I'd like is what I'd always like to actually have just a little list of where the last 20 went.
It's been real popular. It really has. I think we have the ability to, as I recall with Patrick, we have the ability to use that we're not limited to that 20,000. Are we able to use some of the funds that we have within the whole program for accessibility? Wasn't that where we were at? Are we limited to only that?
20,000 was just for,
I thought you and I talked about
Well, the
that.
first year, I believe we gave 20,000 was a supplemental, wasn't it, mid-year? And then in this year's budget, we gave a lump sum, which could be used for both accessibility
so we're open, we can use it for either.
That was my recollection.
That's what I was thinking.
I think there was a when we had a study session, I remember the council was not concerned, but wanted to make sure the money was, and just the 20,000 was going to go for disability grants.
That was the first year. I do remember that.
Oh, and then we're still in the first year, aren't we?
No, we're in the second.
No, we had money budgeted for this budget cycle, I believe.
Yeah, and we've received the funding for this year.
Yeah.
Mr. Pond.
So
I think it would be good to just go back and look at that, because I vaguely remember that there was some sort of discussion about the transition of demand for the different programs that were out there, whether it was the sign program or any other things like that. And it sounds like this one's reaching more demand. So if in fact we hadn't kind of isolated it to only that 20,000, that might be something to look at.
Is this something you want to bring back on the 5th?
Well, I think the business district bylaws talked about separating those pots of money out, just to make sure that council knew where it went. So I think one fund is empty and one fund has general programming. I don't think the board wants to, well, I'm not on the board anymore, but I don't think the board wanted to commingle those funds because of obvious reasons. So you might want to check with the bylaws or check the bylaws.
Yeah, we have actually
policy.
spent over 20,000 on it, and it all comes out of the same fund. So I mean, I can come back with a report for the total that we spent on accessibility grants and some upcoming applications also. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. There's good ones. Yeah, it's pretty good. Okay, I'll bring something.
Thanks.
Are we going to schedule that, or you want to bring that back at a certain date, or just whenever you're ready? Okay, we'll put it on the future agenda, and let Davis know when you're ready.
Any other elected officials matters? Mr. Stites?
Yeah, I just was going to ask, is all code enforcement on vacation at the same time or what? God.
That's because we and I have been working on with 44th Avenue.
Yeah, I don't know why. What's?
Well, I mean, the city, my God, it looks terrible. There's weeds every which way. As far as businesses go, that gas station at 38th and Wadsworth, we got on them a couple years ago, and it looks terrible. I mean, absolutely looks terrible. And then that little shopette right next to it, what's the name of that breakfast place there? Sunrise Sunset. There's weeds growing up and down.
Mm-hmm.
They must be 5 foot tall over there. I just wondered if all code,
Well, I think the mayor's been keeping us busy with his list. I think.
That's not my list. It's the
They're wearing, because they got to drive by there every day, and I don't know if they're wearing too darker glasses or what, but I see them. But I just wondered, can we get, as they're driving around, I mean, this city looks terrible, absolutely terrible.
Well, that gas station I know every time I drive by that, it's all weeds. They have no grass.
Yeah.
We can get them for the weeds, but we can't ask them to necessarily plant grass.
Well, we could, because that was in there.
Yeah.
When that thing was approved, all this stuff when it comes through, it's been approved that they got to have the tree there or whatever, and if that tree dies, they better be replacing it. But as all those things have been approved, they got to have that landscape and stuff. And doesn't mean that you put it in the first time and let it go for 10 years. I think it means that you put it in the first time and maintain it.
Janelle, do you have something to bring up? You said.
I did, and I have a couple of things to mention about the things that you mentioned. One is at Randall Park. Mr. Goff, last Friday night, my husband and I tried to park in the south lot to watch a ball game, and it's filled with construction equipment and pipes and a dumpster and all this stuff. And we actually parked in one place that was available, and pretty soon here came a front-end loader, and he asked us to move so that he could open the door of this, I guess it wasn't a dumpster, it was a storage bin of some sort. And he ultimately parked the front loader there, and then we couldn't park there and watch the game. So, I don't know, construction parking in that parking lot, because that was the whole purpose of that lot, was so there wouldn't be double parking on Fenton, and anyway, so that was an issue. And then you mentioned the gas station at 38th and Wadsworth. The house that is just to the south of that, where the Methodist Church used to be, they have a garage sale there every single Sunday. So, and I don't think they have a sales tax license. I could be wrong, though. But what I wanted to discuss, just briefly mention to you was that, as you know, last week I was in Boulder at the Colorado Municipal Clerks Association Institute, Sunday afternoon through Friday afternoon. I commuted every day, and it was a grueling week. 3 of the nights we stayed till 8:30. And I learned a lot more. This is my second year, but we had presentations on, among other things, risk management, liquor, records retention, working with the attorney, and retail marijuana. And I'm going to prepare a report to give to you all at some later date. Not too lengthy, but just a little more comprehensive as far as what our city has compared to what's expected out there. There was one issue about the retail marijuana, and I know we have a moratorium in effect. There was a recent CML publication about marijuana. Did you all get that? About things to consider and address. Did you get that?
We've got scheduled a session with the council to talk through the various choices.
I just there was one little section in there about things that cities can consider about time, manner, placement, and number of establishments. And those questions there seem to be something that would, I don't know, require a little thought by council. And I thought I could whip those out and pass them on. It's not anything, I'm not trying to step on your territory, but I just noticed that that was something that I thought diligent council people should be sort of talking about and with each other and with citizens, and could give them a little head start on information gathering for how we might want to address that issue. But if you'd like me to butt out, I will.
Well, we've set, I think, a study session on that topic.
And
I know that publication, it's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
We'll probably have it in the package along with the memo I put.
Okay. It was supposed to be tonight, but then it got taken off, and so that's why I brought it up. Okay.
Any other? Okay, guess we're adjourned till Monday. Thank you. Thank you very much.